Hi everyone, my name is Janet Jennings and I'll be sharing part of my story with you today. I want to thank Laura, Katie, and Mason for giving me a platform to share part of my experience as a Black woman being here in southern Minnesota. I started my journey in southern Minnesota in St. Peter in 2013 as an undergraduate student at Gustavus Adolphus College. I then graduated in 2017 with a degree in psychology and Russian. After that, I was employed here at Gustavus, and I've been here ever since. I just started my 4th year of school. I currently work as the Assistant Director of Inclusive Excellence, and it's been a wild ride. I advocate and work with students of all backgrounds, and no day is the same. But when I'm not working, which I often am, I love to bake, hang out with friends, read, take walks in arboretums, and just relax. I come from a family of 2 children. I'm the oldest, and my younger brother just graduated from school, and I'm so proud of him. He just got his degree from Bucknell University. And I would say I've always had a passion for social justice. I would say education runs on both sides of the family. And so I've always wanted to educate and teach. And I think I got that from my mother, who's literally a teacher, elementary school. But she's also a union rep, and so she works with people advocating for them. And then my father is a real estate broker, and he knows the city, and he knows what troubles people are going through, and so I've always been passionate about helping others. Being in Los Angeles is very diverse. I'll kind of break that down a little bit later. And so I got the opportunity, I was blessed with the opportunity to see a lot of the world, to see a lot of different ethnic groups, and to truly understand where I fit in, or where the world thought I fit in as a Black woman. I would say my experience in southern Minnesota has been interesting, to say the least, and I've navigated a lot, and so I'll just kind of break that down in the next few questions. So come on a journey with me. I grew up in Los Angeles, and it's a very diverse place. I would say I've been exposed to all different types of cultures. I would also say that I'm blessed in that aspect. Los Angeles has a very deep and troubling history with redlining, and redlining is the practice, committed by the government and the real estate world, where they would not allow people of color to live in certain areas. They would just not sell the house. Wouldn't sell, wouldn't show, just wasn't happening. You can only buy houses up to a certain street, certain area, and so they kept certain neighborhoods of people of color in between the red lines. That's why it's called redlining. And so Inglewood, up until the mid-60s, was not open to Black people. And so my parents bought a home, and so Inglewood is now about half Black, half Latinx. And that was, it has a rich culture. I've always loved being there. But in saying that, the taxes are lower in our area. And so public school is not the most consistent. And my mother is a public school teacher in the town over, and she's been a teacher now for 31 years, really proud of her. And, she understood that the system was broken and that she couldn't guarantee that we would have consistent schooling or consistent teachers, consistent resources. And so since I've been in preschool at my church's preschool, I've been in private school, specifically private religious school. So preschool and elementary were Lutheran. Middle school and high school were both Catholic, and then I went to a Lutheran college for undergrad. And so I've been blessed in that aspect, and I think that private school has definitely shaped who I am. I can't say what my experience would have been if I went to public school, but I know that I got a lot of resources and opportunities that I would not have had at a public school. And for that, I'm grateful, and that's definitely shaped my experience as well. I would say one of the first times I felt that I was a Black woman, actually realized it, was when I was 7. I was tested as gifted, and people were like, why is she in the room? What's going on? I don't think you're actually gonna pass this test. And I was confident. I was, a little 7-year-old, and I didn't really understand what was going on, but I realized people were questioning me, and that was because the only person that also had been tested for gifted that was a little bit older than us was an Asian woman. And they looked at me and they looked at her and they said, well, I don't think that matches up. And so, those little kids just repeating what their parents were saying. And so that was the first time, and that was just a consistent thing throughout my life is, why are you in this room? I see that you're intelligent, but you're also a Black woman, and that's not computing for me. And so that's definitely I've experienced that my entire life. I love to read. I would say I'm intelligent. I, strive to do my best in academia, and that's just been a consistent thing of my intelligence being questioned. So that's definitely affected my experience as well. Okay, so I'm going to move to the second question now, and that is, have you experienced racism or racial microaggression? The answer is yes. Yes, I have. Everywhere I've been, right? Los Angeles, Minnesota. It's happened everywhere I've been, and it's just a part of my daily life. And I don't want to say I'm used to it. I think the best way to describe it is the mosquito effect. Every day I get small things like, oh, you're 5'7", do you play basketball? And when I tell them I play softball, they're confused. If I mention I play tennis, they're confused. I get a lot of, well, where are you from? Where are you really from? I really could spend all day with this, but I'll keep it short. So a lot of the things I deal with on a daily basis is actually the angry Black woman trope. It's very rooted in white supremacy and trying to silence Black women. So there's less of a physical threat like Black men get, right? People aren't really threatened by the physicality of me. They're threatened by my emotions and my mentality. And so a lot of times, my coworkers, I'll be explicit, they try to undermine my knowledge, as, well, are you being a little sensitive about that? Or, well, that's not what I meant, and that's the journey and the lesson of microaggressions, right? Like, you might not have meant to insult me by asking me, no, where are your parents from then? Well, if you're from Los Angeles, right, expecting me to say, oh, I'm from, Ghana or Nigeria. The impact is that I feel othered. I feel like I'm not American, even though my whole, both sides of my family have been here because of slavery. And so we built this country, right? But their intention is not to make me feel like I'm not American. The intention is to get to know me. But the impact is that, I just don't feel welcome. But I would say I deal with the angry Black woman trope every day. Most days when I'm shopping or other things like that in Mankato or St. Peter, I deal with confused looks, angry looks. Like, people are like, why is she here? But I've never, been called anything out of my name, at least that I can hear, but students here on our campus have been walking and have heard the N-word thrown out the window. I haven't personally experienced that, but I definitely deal with racism on a daily basis. And just stereotypes, people assuming I eat certain things, people assuming I do certain things. When people hear I can sing, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Can you dance? And so it's been a pretty alienating experience being down here in Minnesota. But I'll keep it to that. And let's move on to the next question. To expand on the second question that I answered, I want to answer this third one for you. Do you feel heard, seen, understood, and supported by the community in and around Mankato? So my answer is going to mainly be about St. Peter. I think most of my experience in Mankato is really just, going shopping, hanging out a little bit, but I really truly don't have a connection with Mankato, so that answers that part for you. I don't really have friends in Mankato, and so there's not really a reason for me to be there besides getting ice cream or shopping at Aldi, things like that. So I would say no connection to Mankato, and then at least to the community. And then in St. Peter, I would say no as well, and that's because not only am I a Black woman, right? So there's already stereotypes against me in that, but I'm single, and I also don't go to church. And so I feel like a lot of people don't really see value in hanging out with me. I don't have kids for their kids to play with, I'm not at the same services as them, and a huge part of that is, I would love to have a church community that I love and where I'm valued, because that was really a huge part of my life in Los Angeles. I would say outside of school, that's where I was the most, besides home. And there I felt uplifted, I felt encouraged, I felt, just valued there as a person. And I haven't been able to find that here in St. Peter or Mankato. I'm ELCA Lutheran, so that should be really easy. but I've been to several churches. I've been to non-Lutheran churches. I've been to the Catholic Church because I do miss Mass sometimes. And I just haven't been welcomed. You know, it became a pattern of I would go to church, you know, with a friend, and after church every single time, oh, who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here if you're from Los Angeles? That's crazy. And it just became the same conversation every single time, you know, and that's okay. I didn't get to meet everybody in the first service or the second service or the third service, but I just kept feeling isolated and like a new person, and I just didn't feel like I was being welcomed into the environment, into the liturgy, into the community. And so I just stopped going to church, and that was, I mean, it was here and there. I mean, it's hard to balance church with school. But now that I'm an employee and I have my own life and I have my weekends, it's just, I still haven't found anything. And so that was a huge indicator for me that I'm not truly accepted here. And so, yeah, the answer is no, I would say. The next question I want to answer is, have you ever felt like you needed to be a spokesperson for all Black people to tear down stereotypes or falsehoods? And the answer is yes. I think I've been doing it since a very young age. There's always been pressure to speak up and to share. I've always tried to share from my perspective. You know, I don't experience everything that Black people experience, especially based on, you know, my life and my socioeconomic status and my educational status. And so I can't speak for everyone, but I've also always felt pressure. And now in my job, I'm literally a spokesperson for my students, for coworkers, and that's by design, right? There's only 3 people that do diversity work on this campus, like I mentioned before, which I think is stressful. Most days I end up going home and I'm too tired. I'm an empath, and so I absorb all of that. And some days I'm just like too tired to even do dishes. And that's because I'm asked to represent my students, who number in over 500 if you think about all the students I have to support, the LGBT plus community, students of color, international students, first generation students. I mean, it adds up. And so, you know, religiously diverse students. And so I'm asked to be there for those students, to use their voice, and I use my microphone to amplify that up to administration, you know, to other coworkers. And, you know, there's not really pressure on my white coworkers or my non-Black coworkers to do the same. And so often people turn to me and my boss to do that work for them. And although I love it and I love supporting these students, too much is falling to me most days, and it's disappointing. So, but I've done it for pretty much my entire life, but I truly started seeing it in high school, not at my high school, but at an extra school that I was at. It was a community school where my brother and I did choir there, and there were only about 3 to 4 Black students every year in this choir that we were in. The majority of the choir was white and Asian, and so we were all naive, we were all young, and so they would ask questions like, oh wow, that's, you know, you sound so soulful, do you sing in gospel? And so, you know, I'd have to, you know, break down stereotypes and help them understand. And so I've been an educator from a very young age. You know, education flows in my family. Most of my family on my mom's side, they're either educators or nurses. And so I've loved to educate, and I've been blessed with a spirit that, you know, can take a lot of that, I guess, energy and put it out into the world. But I've been a spokesperson for quite a long time. Well, my last question that I want to answer, kind of combine 2 of them, is what can non-Black POC people and white people do to be allies, and kind of how do I recognize that in people? I would say the biggest thing that I see when it comes to allyship is that you're willing to learn, you're willing to listen, and even when you make mistakes, you don't beat yourself up too much, you get back up, you ask questions. And, you know, I think the biggest thing you need to be comfortable with is making mistakes, right? But also being comfortable with self-educating. I think that's a huge step of maturity, a sign of maturity. When, you know, if you touch my hair, you know, microaggression, touching my hair, that's happened to me many times in Minnesota, many times. You know, if I say, hey, I'd prefer you not touch my hair, you know, it makes me uncomfortable. That would be a great time for you then to say, you know, shoot, I'm sorry. and then maybe take the afternoon, you know, didn't spend like 4 hours, but like, you know, take 20-30 minutes to look up the history of Black women's hair in the workforce. The fact that I'm wearing braids right now at my professional office is huge. Like, my ancestors could only wish for this, right? You know, they spent thousands, millions of dollars straightening their hair because they weren't accepted. And, you know, people didn't listen. And so I think that's the biggest thing you can do is listen. I think a lot of people who identify as white end up trying to be devil's advocate because they don't understand what's going on. And so they want to push people of color, you know, the LGBT plus community, because they don't see it. They want to push them and say, well, were you just being too sensitive? Maybe that person didn't mean that. And again, we've already talked about this, impact versus intent. So the best thing you can do is listen to understand so that you can eventually empathize and actually be in the moment instead of asking for statistics or science or proof, right? Like, we should be able to hear somebody's experience and say, oh, geez, that's not great. What can I do, right? Asking people what they need from you is huge, and not assuming, right? Like, for example, a lot of people will go to other countries and go paint a school or, you know, play with kids. And maybe that's great. Maybe they did need that. But, you know, a lot of those trips failed to truly say, what do you need from us? Schools, you know, do you need us to paint your school? Or do you need school supplies? And I'm sure most places would say the school supplies, right? Like, having an exterior, beautiful exterior is great, but ultimately you need to give power to people of color by asking them what they need and truly listening. And that's the last piece of advice I can give you. Thank you.